On the first day of September, 1939, the German war machine crossed into Poland with 1,500,000 soldiers. The sky above Warsaw filled with the sound of aircraft engines before dawn had even broken. In the fields and roads of western Poland, armored columns moved faster than any army in history had ever moved before. Tanks, motorized infantry, artillery, all moving together, all communicating, all targeting the same points at the same time. Poland had no answer for what was coming. The world had no answer for what was coming. In the space of a single morning, a new kind of war was born, and Germany was winning it completely. At this moment, Germany's military strength on the map looks overwhelming. 3 army groups, 2,750 tanks, 2,300 aircraft. Against Poland's 950,000 defenders, spread across an indefensible border that stretched in every direction. Within the first 72 hours, German forces had already punched through Polish defensive lines in multiple locations. The concept was simple and devastating. Move so fast that the enemy cannot think, cannot react, cannot form a coherent defense. By the time Polish commanders understood what was happening on one part of the front, the situation had already changed entirely on 3 others. 17 days into the invasion, the Soviet Union entered Poland from the east. This was the hidden clause of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, signed just 9 days before the war began in a secret meeting between German and Soviet diplomats in Moscow. Poland, already fighting desperately on its western border, now faced a second invasion from the east with no reserves left to commit. By the first week of October, Poland had fallen. The country ceased to exist on the map. Its soldiers either surrendered, died, or escaped west to continue fighting under Allied command. Germany had conquered an entire nation in 36 days. The map at this point tells one story clearly. Germany is growing, but what the map does not yet show is the cost. Even in this early victory, Germany had lost 16,000 soldiers killed and 30,000 wounded. These were trained men, experienced soldiers, men who had been through years of military development and preparation. Germany could replace them with numbers, but replacing the experience was another matter entirely. Every army that wins a battle uses up something it cannot fully recover. This is the truth buried inside every military victory, and as Germany moved forward from Poland, this truth was quietly accumulating. The spring of 1940 brought the most shocking series of victories the modern world had ever witnessed. In April, Germany seized Denmark in a matter of hours and began the occupation of Norway. In May, the main offensive in the west began with the invasion of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands simultaneously. The French military had spent 20 years and enormous resources building the Maginot Line, a fortress wall along the Franco-German border. Germany simply went around it. German armored forces drove through the Ardennes forest, which French commanders had considered impassable for tanks, and emerged behind the entire Allied defensive line. 3 million German soldiers were now flooding westward. The Netherlands fell in 5 days. Belgium held for 18 days before surrendering. At Dunkirk, 338,000 British and French soldiers were surrounded against the English Channel with nowhere to go. The German advance halted for reasons that historians still debate, and in that pause, a desperate evacuation began. Over 9 days, civilian boats, fishing vessels, and military ships crossed back and forth across the channel until the beaches were empty. The soldiers were saved, their equipment was not. France fell 46 days after the German offensive began. By the summer of 1940, Germany controlled more of Europe than any single power since the Roman Empire. On paper, Germany had never looked stronger. But Germany was now facing Britain across the Channel, and Britain would not negotiate. The Royal Air Force had to be destroyed before any invasion could be considered. Through the summer and autumn of 1940, the Luftwaffe launched wave after wave of attacks against British airfields, radar stations, and cities. The Battle of Britain lasted nearly 4 months. Every day, German bombers crossed the Channel, and every day British fighter pilots rose to meet them. Germany was losing aircraft at a rate it could not sustain indefinitely. By October, The numbers had turned against the Luftwaffe. Germany had lost over 1,700 aircraft. The Royal Air Force had lost 915, but had replaced most of them through production. Hitler cancelled the invasion of Britain and turned his attention east. June 22, 1941, represents the moment the Second World War fundamentally changed. Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, with 3,800,000 soldiers across a front stretching nearly 2,000 miles from north to south. This was the largest military invasion in the history of human warfare. 3 army groups drove into Soviet territory simultaneously. Army Group North toward Leningrad, Army Group Center toward Moscow, Army Group South toward Kiev and the oil fields beyond. In the first week alone, the Soviet Air Force lost over 4,000 aircraft, most of them destroyed on the ground before their pilots could even reach them. Soviet armies were encircled and captured in groups of hundreds of thousands. In the first 3 months, Germany captured over 3 million Soviet prisoners. The map in the summer of 1941 shows Germany at its absolute peak. The territory under German control stretches from the English Channel to deep inside the Soviet Union, from Norway to North Africa. German forces are 700 kilometers from Moscow. The number of soldiers committed to this front alone exceeds anything humanity had previously organized for a single military campaign. But something is changing that the map does not immediately reveal. Germany's fuel consumption on the Eastern Front is extraordinary. The supply lines are stretching thinner and thinner across the vast Soviet landscape. And the Soviet Union, unlike France, unlike Poland, unlike every other country Germany had faced, is simply not running out of space to retreat into. The autumn of 1941 slowed Germany's advance. Rain turned Soviet roads to mud. Vehicles sank. Supply columns fell behind. And then, in November and December, temperatures plunged to -30 and -40 degrees Celsius. German soldiers, equipped for a summer campaign because Hitler had expected the war to be finished before winter, began to freeze. Engines would not start without being lit by fires underneath them. Weapons jammed in the cold. Men wrapped themselves in whatever they could find. The German advance outside Moscow ground to a halt. On December 5, 1941, the Soviet Red Army launched a massive counteroffensive and drove the Germans back from the capital. For the first time, German forces retreated on a significant scale. The myth that Germany could not be stopped had been broken. 2 days later, on December 7, 1941, Japan attacked the United States Navy at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. America entered the war. The industrial output of the United States, the largest manufacturing economy on Earth, was now committed to the Allied cause. In 1942, American factories would produce 47,000 aircraft. In the same year, Germany produced 15,000. The imbalance was not sustainable for Germany over time, but time was exactly what Germany's commanders still believed they had enough of. 1942 was the year Germany made its final gamble. Unable to resume the drive on Moscow, Hitler directed the main summer offensive southward toward the oil fields of the Caucasus region. One arm of this offensive was aimed at a city on the Volga River named Stalingrad. Taking the city would cut Soviet supply lines and secure the flank of the drive toward oil. By late summer, German forces had reached the city, and fierce urban fighting had begun. Street by street, building by building, room by room, the battle consumed soldiers on both sides at a rate that neither side could rationally justify. The ruins of Stalingrad became the most contested ground on Earth. In November 1942, the Soviet Union launched Operation Uranus. 2 massive Soviet forces drove into the weakly held flanks on either side of the German position at Stalingrad and linked up behind it. 265,000 German and Axis soldiers were surrounded. Hitler ordered them to hold. No retreat was permitted. The surrounded forces fought on through November and December, supplied inadequately by air, their numbers shrinking through combat, starvation, cold, and disease. On February 2, 1943, the surviving 91,000 German soldiers at Stalingrad surrendered. The Sixth Army, One of the most powerful fighting formations Germany had ever fielded was gone. From this point on, the map tells a different story. Germany no longer expands. Germany contracts. The summer of 1943 brought the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, where Germany launched its final major offensive on the Eastern Front and was defeated by a Soviet defense that had been prepared specifically to absorb and then destroy it. After Kursk, Germany would never again attack on the Eastern Front, only defend, only retreat. Month by month, the territories Germany had seized between 1939 and 1942 began to come back off the map. Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic states, Poland again. Every kilometer was contested. Every retreat cost soldiers Germany could no longer replace at the rate they were being lost. In the West, the Allies landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944. 156,000 soldiers crossed the Channel on the first day alone. The Western Front, which had not truly existed since 1940, reopened with overwhelming force. Germany was now defending on 3 fronts simultaneously, east, west, and south through Italy. By August 1944, Paris was liberated. By September, Allied forces were approaching Germany's western border. On the Eastern Front, Soviet armies had advanced 600 miles in 6 months. The German map was shrinking faster now than it had ever grown. Germany's last major offensive in the West, launched through the Ardennes in December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge was Germany's attempt to cut Allied supply lines and force a negotiated peace. It failed. The fuel that the offensive depended on ran out before it reached its objectives. By January 1945, the Bulge had been eliminated and Allied forces resumed their advance. Germany was now fighting inside Germany itself. To the east, Soviet forces were crossing into German territory in their millions. Berlin was the final objective of both Allied advances. The city was surrounded in April 1945. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler died in his underground bunker beneath Berlin as Soviet forces fought through the streets above him. Germany had begun this war with the largest, most modern, most experienced fighting force in the world. 6 years later, that force had been reduced from millions of trained soldiers to teenagers and elderly men defending a destroyed capital city. On May 8, 1945, Germany signed unconditional surrender documents. The European war was over. The final accounting is simple in numbers and impossible in human terms. Germany started the war with one of the most powerful armies ever assembled and ended it with nothing. The Soviet Union lost 27 million people, soldiers, and civilians combined. Poland lost nearly a fifth of its entire population. Across every country involved, in every theater of the war, 70 million human beings died in 6 years. Every single day on this map represents thousands of real deaths, thousands of families destroyed, thousands of futures that never arrived. This is how Germany lost World War II. Not in a single battle, not in a single decision, but day by day, choice by choice, front by front, slowly running out of everything a nation needs to fight: soldiers, fuel, equipment, and time.